From controversial stances on masculinity to not believing in God. Here's why Jordan Peterson became an atheist. So, have you heard about Jordan Peterson's stance on God? It's a bit of a doozy. He's got this whole complicated thing going on, where he says he acts as if God exists, but he doesn't want to just flat out say whether he believes in God or not. This has caused quite a stir among both religious folks and atheists. People want him to just pick a side already, and stop being so wishy-washy about it. But Peterson's argument is that God is such a complex and abstract concept that it's not so simple as just saying whether you believe in him or not. It's definitely a controversial stance. But hey, that's Jordan Peterson for you. He's never been one to shy away from stirring the pot. But get this, he's not your typical religious guy who's all loud and proud about his beliefs. In fact, he's pretty quiet about it. But in a chat with an atheist guy named Sam Harris, Peterson finally spilled the beans and said he believes in God. Kind of. But the way he talks about God is pretty unique. He says things like, God is all about telling the truth and fixing messed up power structures. Or, God is the most important thing in our system of values. And he thinks God is the one who judges us and shows us mercy when we screw up.
Well, I'll tell you a couple of strange things, things that I don't really understand. The first is, when we've done the analysis of the effects of the future authoring program, it has had a differential impact on men.
So even though he's not shouting from the rooftops about it, maybe Jordan Peterson understands something about God that most people don't. Harris thinks that Peterson's definition of God doesn't really correspond to what most people think of when they hear the word God. He suggests that Peterson would be better off just saying that he doesn't believe in the traditional idea of God. But for Peterson, it seems like the concept of God is something that defies easy definition or explanation. He's not willing to rule out the idea of God altogether, but he's also not interested in trying to fit God into a neat little box. Instead, he seems to be more interested in exploring how different ideas and concepts might be connected to something bigger and more meaningful than ourselves. So, while Peterson's views on God may be a bit murky, it seems like he's trying to grapple with some big questions and ideas in a way that's both honest and thought-provoking. And who knows, maybe his willingness to embrace the mystery and complexity of God will lead to some new insights and understandings in the future. But how did this thought process begin? Well, it's a long story. Back in his college days, Jordan Peterson went through a really tough time. He was really searching for meaning and purpose. And during that process, he started to realize that he had this capacity for violence inside of him. It was pretty scary stuff. One night, after a party, he came home drunk and painted a really sacrilegious picture. It was a pretty intense experience for him and left him feeling really unsettled. He just couldn't understand where all this darkness was coming from. It's a pretty wild story, and it just goes to show that even someone like Jordan Peterson, who seems to have it all figured out, has had to deal with some serious demons in his life. Anyway, after struggling to make sense of his inner darkness, Jordan Peterson stumbled upon the works of Carl Jung, the founder of analytical psychology. Reading Jung's ideas felt like a revelation for Peterson, as he had finally found someone who understood what he was going through. One quote in particular from Jung really resonated with him. It must be admitted that the archetypal contents of the collective unconscious can often assume grotesque and horrible forms in dreams and fantasies. It was like Jung was speaking directly to him and his own experiences. Jung's ideas about the collective unconscious and the power of archetypes really opened up a new way of thinking for Peterson, and he continued to draw on Jung's work in his own writing and teaching. Basically, what Jung was saying in that quote is that even the most logical, rational person can still be affected by their dreams and fears.
So, and you know, it's not the only reason, because the other thing that's happened is that the rate of technological transformation is so fast now, and the rate of turnover of things is that it is genuinely harder for people who are, say, 18 to 20.
He believed that our thoughts and dreams are shaped not just by our own individual experiences, but also by the collective experiences of our ancestors, whose genes we share and whose stories we continue to tell. It's a pretty strange idea, but it makes a lot of sense when you think about it. Our ancestors passed down their beliefs and experiences through stories, traditions, and even genetics. And those things can still have an impact on us today. That's why Peterson was so struck by Jung's ideas, because it gave him a framework for understanding the darkness inside himself, and where it might be coming from. Peterson definitely found a lot of value in Carl Jung's ideas, even if he didn't fully agree with everything Jung had to say. One of the things that really resonated with Peterson was Jung's belief that mythology and religion can be incredibly useful tools for understanding the human psyche. Peterson also liked Jung's idea of universal archetypes, which are basically common patterns or symbols that show up in myths and stories from all around the world. Jung believed that these archetypes help us understand how the human mind has evolved to navigate the balance between order and chaos in nature. For Peterson, the idea of order and chaos is really important. He believes that humans have a deep-seated need for order and structure in their lives, but that we also need to be able to handle chaos and uncertainty. Understanding these archetypes can help us find that balance and lead more fulfilling lives. It's a pretty fascinating way of looking at things. In the Christian concept of Christ as the mediator between God and humanity, and even in the hero's journey in popular films and literature. For Peterson, this idea of navigating between chaos and order is not just a theoretical concept, but a practical one.
I've been talking a lot to the crowds that I've been talking to, not about rights, but about responsibility, right? Because you can't have the bloody conversation. What are you doing? You can't have the conversation about rights without the conversation about responsibility, because your rights are my responsibility.
He sees it as a call to action for individuals to take responsibility for their lives, to confront the chaos in the world and within themselves, and to strive towards creating order and meaning in their lives. So, in a way, Peterson's message is that we can find purpose and direction in our lives by embracing the challenge of navigating between chaos and order. And who knows, maybe by doing so, we can become our own heroes and saviors in the story of our lives. While he vehemently believes in changing your own life and stabilizing yourself with the help of control rather than religion, there have been instances where he quotes the Bible. So where does he stand? Everyone would naturally assume that a person is using references from religion because of their beliefs. Turns out Jordan doesn't do that either. He doesn't use scriptures and references to Jesus because he believes in Christianity, but because the big man wants to illustrate his meta-myth of chaos. And to a Western audience that is heavily influenced by the Bible. So much for knowing your audience, no? Anyway, he doesn't think these scriptures are true or inspired by God, because, well, he has a whole nother definition of God. In his teachings, Jesus isn't the risen Lord, who through his resurrection and death will quite literally bestow eternal life upon us. But he isn't less than a mythical creature, who's there to help us understand the balance between chaos and order. Some Christians think that Peterson is gradually embracing a more Judeo-Christian perspective. To be honest, if you've read his books, you wouldn't notice much of a difference in his stance. Peterson's current positions and those he expressed in Maps of Meaning 1999 are pretty much the same. So it's safe to say that he's quite adamant about where he stands. And this is all I had to say about Jordan Peterson and his atheist journey.